across the sky. Who knew a storm would come and break apart this lie? Like a pillar of flame, my love burned through the roof. It couldn't be contained, but you were fireproof. I'm trapped in the void, an endless plane. No armor can protect me from this pain. Backstabbed by the one who I love most. Betrayed. How am I supposed to cope? I should be glad that we're apart. When you're so reckless with my heart. Revenge for the wounds that you can't see. Rebirth from the ashes where you left me. And when your tears fully stacked, I know that you'll come crawling back. I gave you 8 long years, and you just threw it away. They even got a new man, and you still wouldn't stay. I guess you had some reasons. They benched you that one split. They made you play Garen, you and me, but I never thought you'd quit. I'm trapped in the void, an endless plane. No armor can protect me from this pain. Backstabbed by the one who I love most. Betrayed. How am I supposed to cope? I should be glad that we're apart. When you're so reckless with my heart. Revenge for the wounds that you can't see. Rebirth from the ashes where you left me. And when your tears fully stacked, I know that you'll come crawling back. We are the ones who have lost, we're still fighting. We are the ones who have lost, we're still fighting. We are the ones who have lost, we're still fighting. We are the ones who have lost, we're still fighting. We are the ones who have lost, we're still fighting. This is goodbye with the words that I'm writing. Backstabbed by the one who I love most. Betrayed. How am I supposed to cope? I should be glad that we're apart. When you're so reckless with my heart. Revenge for the wounds that you can't see. Rebirth from the ashes where you left me. And when your tears fully stacked, I know that you'll come crawling back.
Welcome to Berlin, Germany, home of the best league in the world. This is the week where an iconic rivalry gets a brand new twist. An LEC legend faces his old team in an inevitable showdown. Backstabbed, betrayed, reckless with my heart. What a track, what a story. What a terrible tragedy for Fnatic fans. Or is it? Because the question I ask you is, will he go crawling back? Again! This has happened before, Medic. We've seen it. Fnatic have been backstabbed by Reckless, but he returned.
He did, and then they were quite successful after he returned. However, I'm going to say I still think G2 are going to be more successful this year with Reckless than Fnatic are going to be without him.
Ooh,
They did make World Finals.
They did.
True.
They did. Listen, we'll see
Thinking of it,
Reckless taking on Fnatic, his old team, tomorrow. It is going to be the match of the week. You will be hearing a lot about it because it is a huge story. It's going to be an epic clash. Let's turn our attention back to today and the week at hand. We're going to have to answer a lot of questions about the teams. Take a look at the standings on your screen right now, and I want to talk about how well the teams have done so far. I want to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. I think I want to frame them in a way of which teams are overwhelming us with positivity and which teams are underwhelming us with disappointments. I'm going to go to you first, Aaron. Let's go. Overwhelming.
I think I'm most overwhelmed by Rogue so far. The introduction of Trimby in the bottom lane from the AGO Rogue lineup really has given them a new light and a new life. And I think alongside that, their willingness to not only look for rookies from their ERL roster, but also find Odawamne, this veteran voice for the team, really shored up a lot of the weakness that I saw from them in 2020. And I actually think Odawamne to Rogue is probably the best roster move in the offseason, in my opinion.
That's such a big claim. And it is true, because you said it during rehearsal, and like my jaw kind of dropped. But it makes sense, because the value he brings the team, the impact he has on the roster and the organization as a whole.
Yeah, I just think he brings so much stability, right? I think that the Rogue was missing that final link in the chain, which was the top side. Finn was always going for volatile matchups. There was so much jungle attention there, but now Odoamne can fit any piece of the puzzle that Rogue want to go with, whether it's a draft, whether it's a team comp, whether it's how they want to play the game in general. I think that I agree with Medic. Barring Reckless, I think it is probably the best pick of the offseason.
It really is.
I'm going to say, I think even with Reckless, I think Odoamne to Rogue makes more of a difference for Rogue than Reckless to G2 has made for G2.
I think net gain. I'm on board with that. Yeah. Now, of course, the loss is going to be for Schalke, of course. You know, Broken Blaze now come in. During rehearsal, you were talking about Schalke and how they're a little bit closer to overwhelming for you, Caedrel.
Yeah, I think the Schalke performed super well this last week. I mean, there was so much expectations on them. Like, they went on a 10-0 win streak. Like, they were playing so good with their Miracle Run. And everyone's like, okay, how is Schalke going to fare? They lost Odoamne, which was like their consistent factor throughout the whole Miracle Run, doing so much shot calling, filling lots of voids that they needed. But Broken Blade's this volatile carry that's come in now, and I think that he's fitted in much better in the last couple of weeks that we've seen. The first week was quite shaky. Schalke looked a bit all over the place. Even against teams like Vitality, they were struggling. But now Broken Blade against G2 especially, Schalke against G2. And you can argue that, well, G2 might have been trolling. Maybe they did a bad draft, but they last picked Kled into Aatrox, which is actually historically a good matchup because of the healing reduction. So I think G2 draft, holistically, was not bad. I think G2 took the game seriously, but Schalke just played better.
I think the really big thing for me with Schalke in that game is they did make some mistakes in the mid game, and G2 started to get like a handle back on the match. And we've seen so many times G2 get back into a game and just take it over. Schalke didn't let them do that. They reset, they got themselves into a good mental state, and then were able to continue to control the game, even though G2 were finding small areas of purchase.
And the thing is, if you look at G2 over the last couple of weeks, they don't stomp you in the early game. They don't beat you in 15 minutes. They don't have a 5,000 gold lead. They don't have an insane amount of dragon control. The whole point of G2 is when it comes to 20 minutes, they're just a cerebral team. They're so good at executing fights. So they take the right fights, they execute them perfectly, and then they snowball the game through mid to late game. Whereas against Schalke, they never really got a lead, and then Schalke's lead consistently grew, and Schalke just played the game pretty well, I think. So that's why I would call them, in a way, overwhelming in a sense.
I get what you mean. It's a testament to what Schalke are demonstrating, and whether or not they can maintain this ring of form, we'll find out today. Now, before I get to underwhelming, trying to figure out what you do in the middle category, because it's good, bad, ugly. It's kind of like, you know, in the middle, there's a scale to it. So I was trying to think a little bit of thoroughly whelmed? Can you say whelmed? Is whelmed a word?
I mean, it's not a word, but you can definitely say it, Trevor. We'll let you get away with it.
I love that we have a graphic for this, because I did this joke off air. It didn't really land. I'm going to go Fnatic. I think I'm whelmed by Fnatic. I'm not sure where I would classify them. They've got the two craziest, bloodiest games of the split so far, 50 kills and 47 kills. They've had absolutely chaotic, crazy, non-stop action-packed games, but then in between those, they've also had some of the most coordinated, calculated, disciplined games. So I don't yet have a consistent read, and I think the volatility of the teams and the players right now in the first 2 weeks means that I'm not willing to put them in either positive or negative category just yet.
I think looking at the tweets from Bwipo and Yamato Cannon after their performance against the Mad Lions gives me hope for this team, because although they lost, both Bwipo and Yamato were like, hey, we played our style, we played it well, it was a good game. I would have liked, Bwipo said he would have liked to shake hands with the enemy team afterwards, right? And it's like, that gives me some hope, because early in the split, that's where you can lose games like that and be like, hey, it was a good game. If they were doing that in week 8 and saying we played our style, it's like, well, your style isn't flipping working, is it? Because you're losing games.
I agree with that. The beginning of a year, beginning of a season is the time to limit test. Whether or not it is limit testing is another question altogether. Underwhelmed. Vitality. I have been in love with Skeens' early game in week 1. I think as a team, they have shown a game plan, they've shown an approach. And then after sort of like 12 or 13 or 14 minutes, it just fizzles and doesn't really go anywhere, and that's disappointing. Yeah,
you can see it on the stats. Look at the win-loss versus the major lead that they have versus a major deficit, right? They're always getting major leads, but they just don't translate it into anything. Their goal of 15 is positive. They have good early games, which is a good fundamental for a rookie team. Having a good early game is something that lots of teams strive to have, because they just kind of wait for their mistakes. But actually being proactive and snowballing an early lead is very important. But actually translating that into the mid to late game is even more important. And I think Vitality lack that one voice or two voices in the team where they can confidently tell the team where to be and what to do in the mid to late game stages and how to control the objectives. Because you can see Gilius walking in, stealing away the 4th Ocean Dragon in front of all of Vitality's face, essentially 1 versus 5. The late game rotations are just bad. The Baron control's poor. So even though they get a lead going into the mid to late game, it just feels like Vitality is just so underwhelming when it comes to closing the game out.
And the reason it's so heartbreaking is that the early game just doesn't look that bad. You know, there's impact, there's ideas. We were taking a look at some of Skeens' stats, and he's 10th when it comes to jungle proximity, 10th when it comes to K+, say,
Yeah.
10th when it comes to goal difference. But he's trying, like he's showing up a little bit, but it's not having the impact that he really needs.
The problem is that was exactly from last week, those stats. You know, lowest jungle proximity, lowest gold, lowest XP difference. Everything was low, and it just felt like nothing was actually happening past the early game.
Now, of course, definitely bold, crazy statements after 2 weeks of play. That's why I'm here. Just a quick reminder that we are going to be playing on patch 11.2 for this week. Viego is still going to be disabled. Let's move along a little bit. I'm still stuck in Elo Hell. It'll be a surprise to nobody. The Iron Maiden is going to be here to save me from Iron 4. Medic, please take us to the clinic and tell us all why Rell is undefeated in the LEC.
Yeah, I can tell you about Rell. Can't talk to you about that rash right now, but we will talk about that later, Trevor. Now, around the world, Rell is starting to make a name for herself as a very strong situational support. And in the LEC, she's the only champion that's been played more than 5 times and still has a 100% win rate. After only being picked up once in week 1, Rell jumped up the support priority charts and was actually picked in the last 4 LEC games. So what makes the Iron Maiden such a powerful pick? Well, let's have a look at some of her mechanics and why she's risen to prominence in the LEC. First off, her passive, Break the Mold. It allows Rell's basic attacks to steal 10% of her enemy's armor and magic resist for the next 4 seconds. Now, I know what you're thinking. 10%, come on, Medic, it's not that much. We're talking like 50 armor magic resist in lane. She gets an extra 5 armor and magic resist overall. La-di-da, big whoop. Well, think of it this way. If you're Rell trading into Leona at level 3, Leona uses her W, Eclipse, and it gives her 20 bonus armor and magic resist. You jump in and you auto attack her 1 time. Leona's armor drops from 72 to 65, and her magic resist drops from 45 to 40. Alongside that, your armor, Rell's armor, and your magic resist go up by the same amount. So now, instead of being at a disadvantage in terms of tankiness, you're actually on a relatively even level, while only having to use a single auto attack to mitigate Leona's W. Compounding this, if Rell also attacks the enemy bot laner, she steals even more armor and MR. In a trade like this, Rell has stolen about 10 to 15 armor, 8 to 10 magic resist, and in total, that's 400 gold worth of stats. This is the key reason we're seeing her picked into melee supports like Leona, like Nautilus, because she has so much power at negating the enemy's tankiness. Now, on top of her passive, Rell has incredible zone control when it comes to fighting. Whenever the enemy team is grouped up, you can use Crash Down, Attract Repel, and land on them and get multi-man stuns and knockups. And it's not only applicable in lane, it also is applicable when it comes to team fighting. The zone control you get when you get to an objective first and you can make the enemy clump up in small choke points is so powerful because of Rell's ultimate Magnet Storm. Well, have a look at this from the Rogue Vitality game. You can see Rogue are getting Vitality funneled into this choke point. Rogue go for the initial engage, can't get anything, and Trimby notices Vitality are all in this small area. Trimby is going to jump in, use the Magnet Storm, flip comp in, and Vitality don't have an opportunity to reposition and ever take a good fight, so they end up losing it. Now, even though Trimby dies, the amount of displacement and time he's bought for Rogue mean that Vitality just have to run away. Now, when teamed up with some zoning control teammates, Rell has so much disruption and power in team fights. Things like the Orianna Shockwave, the Cataclysm from Jarvan, even Kai'Sa's ultimate. You can use Rell's E when Kai'Sa dives in to get a guaranteed stun on the backline. It makes it almost impossible for enemy teams to actually play fights effectively. In terms of itemization, Rell players are looking for armor, MR, health, move speed. I love Shurelius. It gives you upfront move speed and allows you to position well in team fights. You can also go for Locket for some natural tankiness, and it definitely helps when fights are going to go a little bit longer. And also, Dead Man's Plate is a good early option. It gives you a bit of movement speed, and it's actually cheaper than the other two because it's not a mythic, so it gives you a small power boost earlier in the game. Rell gives you laning power. She negates the enemy's tankiness, provides incredible disruption in team fights. She doesn't fit well into every composition, and she will struggle into range support matchups, but she's definitely rising to prominence as one of the best supports for the current meta. Now, speaking about other supports, I'm going to take a second. They don't know I'm going to do this. I want to talk about items. You know how many times a support has bought a mythic and a legendary item in the LEC this split? 14. 14 out of a possible 50. That's 28%. You know how many times AD carries have got them? Every single game. AD carries over here getting 4 legendaries, stocking up, and then complaining about the fact they're weak. It's 2021. AD carries suck. No, they don't. They're great. And then you have these Moonstone Renewers, Staff of Flowing Water top laners coming in and stealing our support items. They're mine. You're just trying to short my stock. And then I've got a message for you guys. Look, supports, listen to me. Hold the line. Hold the line. We've got diamond hands. We're going to the moon supports. Okay, hold the line. Keep the items. Keep the items.
A kill to
Oh, he
rectify
gets it.
that. That's a double. He's looking for
Triple
more.
kill.
That's a triple. He's looking for 4. That's the quadra. He will get it. The reset forward. Looking for a pentakill. We're in Sweden. The Swedish champion gets it. It's a pentakill. Fnatic topple G2 and are your spring split champions.
OG have cut down Fnatic and will find themselves in a rematch versus G2.
G2, they take it, and G2 are your champions!
I'm tired of being like second place or losing quarterfinals or all that. Like I just want to win, and I think G2 gives me the best chances of doing so.
Fnatic is always a successful organization, so I want to make sure that it stays this way.
G2 didn't just get reckless, they also lost perks. If other teams think we'll drop off because of that, then they are awaiting a pretty rude awakening.
The rest of the team, that's going to be a 3-man ultimate. Trying to finish off Patrick, uncontested, doing so much damage, but it's not enough. Vicky there to body block, and G2 just cannot be stopped in a team fight. My God, look at that!
I mean, so Fnatic G2 is like a rivalry that's been there ever since I joined, or like even before I joined. It's always just a competition between Fnatic and G2, which team will win the trophy.
With the history of Fnatic players going to G2, it always makes the matchup more interesting.
For me, it's not as personal as it is for Caps and Reckless. They just can't allow themselves to lose against Fnatic.
I'm probably too excited to play against Fnatic. I have been in this situation before when Caps joined G2 and I was probably too excited to play them, and then I kind of ran it down in that game.
Fnatic can't even surrender yet. The fastest win of spring. G2 destroyed Fnatic.
I should just go into the game thinking it's just another game, but I know that's going to be hard.
For the first time since 2018, Fnatic takes down
Coming in, this is his hero moment. If he wants to turn this fight in favor of team, this could be the game. Dividing moment.
You can do that to them!
G2 falling time and time again.
G2 are inevitable! G2 are inescapable! 7 titles for G2!
Perks always had that presence there, and I think that the fact that that presence is so similar to the presence Reckless had in Fnatic, and it shifted, it's gonna be great.
Yeah, I don't think Reckless going to G2 will improve the team a lot.
We had some issues last year with Wipo and Selfmade both having like very strong opinions, and I think Upset is another one of those guys. So probably one of them will have to lay down their weapons and play a more supportive role in the team. If there's too many carries, then I think it will be hard to make it work.
Fnatic has to prove that we can be again the top org, right? The top team in League of Legends.
Fnatic rule Europe.
Not just that second team that everybody just looks from the top.
G2 are the greatest team we have ever produced in Europe, and they go back to back to back to back and win the summer season.
I think it's always gonna be exciting to face Fnatic. They've got new players too, and they always have players that can talk a lot, right? So I'm excited to shut them up and just prove that we're better once and for all again. Another year, another G2 is better than Fnatic.
Oh my word. 16 titles have been won in Europe. 15 of them have been hoisted between Fnatic and G2. And Reckless will be wearing G2 colors for his first ever G2 versus Fnatic. It is a completely different look on the Fnatic side. And now Fnatic are going to be staring across Caps and Reckless, the players that took them to a world final. It's mind-boggling.
I mean, it's just absolutely crazy because even negating the fact it's Fnatic versus G2, the last time anyone but Caps or Reckless won an LEC title was 2017 summer. And that was still G2. It was just G2 with Perks and with Hjanen and with Did. Like, it's been so long since we've seen anyone else lift the title.
Yeah, and if you look at this game, there is 7 world finalists in this game. 7. 8 world finalist appearances if you count Caps as well, and two times he did it. Now, if that's not a banger game, I don't know what is. Honestly, 7 world finalist appearances.
7 world finalists with one team having made it to a world final on both sides of the rift, right? It's mind-boggling. It is going to be Game 5 on Saturday. It is always a showdown between G2 and Fnatic, but between now and then, there is a lot of action coming up. And one of the interesting questions I'm throwing around in my mind is, could we be watching another European world finalist? It'll be Schalke and Rogue as the game that I'm watching in Game 4 today. Both of these teams went 2-0 last week. We'll be diving into Misfits XL in just a moment. But Medic, where are your eyes on today's rundown?
I mean, I was going to say Schalke Rogue as well, but you've already stolen that from me. I'll go for Mad Lions SK. I still have high hopes for SK. I still think like this lineup, if they can start getting everything to work on the same page, could be really strong. And Mad Lions have progressively looked stronger and stronger throughout the last couple of weeks. Their performance against Fnatic was very much like the Mad Lions of old, so I'm quite excited to see if they can keep that ball rolling.
Yeah, against Mad Lions versus that was a complete bloodbath. That was over 50 kills, so it's hard for me to draw conclusions. But if Mad Lions fix their individual mistakes of getting caught, I think this team is really solid because personally, I think Mad Lions is top 3 best early game team we have in the league. And if they can clean up their late game, I think they're a very solid team.
That's a really bold statement. Now, do you buy into the optimism for SK? Captain Stonks over here is saying bye, bye, bye to the rest.
If it's a good support, you buy the Stonks. That's how it works.
I think the progression curve is going to be slow for SK because obviously all of them are quite new to the stage, quite new to the LEC, barring Genax really. So there's going to be a slow start to them. I think they're sitting around middle of the pack right now. Towards the end of playoffs, I think that we'll see improvement. Will they make playoffs? I'm not sure yet.
Oh, good
we just need someone to short their stock.
I like that.
That's what we need to happen.
Right.
This guy's memes are flying around.
Do not take
I have to dodge them.
do not take financial advice from Budget Zlatan over here. Now, before we get into the game, let's check in with Law and Misfits Gaming strategic coach.
Budget slut.
Thank you very much, Quickshot, and thank you, Candyfloss, for joining me.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. So you just told me this is your very first interview on broadcast. So I know you became a coach in 2018, but you were previously known as a jungler before that. So tell me about your job at Misfits as a strategic coach, and how did your experience as a player could help you during this job?
So before I got into coaching, I was a jungler, and I was just doing it more as a hobby during university. But during my last year at university, I didn't have as much time to play anymore, so that's how I got into coaching. And I think my experience as a player is really helpful when implementing it into coaching because I'm able to understand not only the coach's perspective, but I'm also able to relate to a player's perspective and the issues they see within the game. And a big part of my job is just to help with the game planning, help with the drafting, and each week fixing the micro and macro mistakes that we're making in the game.
Right, as you said, you can see the two sides of the coin, if that makes sense. So when you take an example as last week when you went 0-2 as Misfits, how did you tackle the issues that you guys had, and how different can be your approach when you deal with veteran players like Kobe and Vendor maybe, or rookie players like Video?
Well, we're really lucky in Misfits. Everyone obviously has a big desire to win, but it's expected that there's going to be tough weeks. We're a new team, so we can't expect to win every week and go 2-0. I'm really proud of the veteran players, Vander and Kobe. I think they're doing a really good job at boosting the confidence of Hirit and Vito and even Razok because he's relatively new too. And I'm just really happy because they give them the confidence that they can bounce back and they can do better in the next week. And at the end of the day, we know it's a long season, there's 18 games, so we went 0-2 next week, but we just refresh our mind. We look at the mistakes we made and we improve for the next week.
It's a marathon in the end, not a sprint, and we all know that. So that's the best approach, I think. So coming into this week with XL as a first opponent, how will you approach this game, especially since we kind of saw the same thing from XL over the past 2 weeks?
I think XL is a really solid team. They play really disciplined and follow their game plan. I think their main strength as a team is their AD carry Patrick. I think he's a great player, but it's also in some ways a double-edged sword because I think sometimes they're too reliant on him and it's the Patrick show, and if he doesn't show up, then I think their backup plan is not so good. So I think we will be able to gain advantages through their kind of linear play style, and we just have to be aware of the pocket picks and the surprise picks that they do, like the Ivan top, the Lulu top, and that's just something that we'll be cautious of in the draft.
All right, seems like you have a solid plan. I can't wait to see you guys on stage against XL today. Thank you very much, Candyfloss, for the interview.
Thank you for the interview. Cheers.
You're welcome. And back to you, Quickshot. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Law. Absolutely fantastic interview. I think one of my favorite things that we see from all the interviews here at the LEC is the players and the coaches saying goodbye to Law. I don't know why. It makes me feel so happy. The one thing I want to call out there, of course, Candyfloss saying a lot about fixing both the macro and the micro mistakes, recognizing the team went 0-2, acknowledging it's a marathon or a sprint. Now, these are things you hear fairly frequently, but the truth is the proof is in the pudding, right? Now you need to actually see that development. You need to see those things being fixed. And, you know, it's a tough task for Candyfloss and the team.
Yeah, Candyfloss is a long-time friend of mine. I mean, I played against him a lot throughout the last few seasons. Season 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, this guy finished really high in Challenger, so he was a very, very good player, but obviously didn't have time to play the game too much. And when I actually role swapped from mid to jungle, he was the first person to sit down with me and help me a lot. I was playing in Ninjas in Pajamas for the EU Masters. It was my first tournament, and he was helping me so much to become a good jungler.
I absolutely remember those times. On broadcast, I was not the nicest to you back when those early jungling days, Caedrel. Well, listen, let's move on, because now a win today, it's not going to secure you that spot in top 6. Obviously, it's week 3, right? But it is getting you a head start in the race for playoffs. I mean, Caedrel just said it a minute ago. You know, picking up these wins is crucially important.
Oh, so wait, Trev. So you're saying winning is important when you want to get into playoffs?
Oh, good facts, Trevor. Good one,
mate. This is the high tier knowledge that we have you for.
Shocked
oh, here we go.
Made that mistake. That's what I'm going to say.
Captain XL missed playoffs by 1.
Captain XL.
2 wins, multiple splits in a row. Multiple seasons.
Did you not hear his advice before?
Yeah, just win for it.
Yeah, just win.
Yeah, no, but going back to being a bit more serious here, it's kind of true. Like, if we did, looking at summer, looking at spring, we missed playoffs both times by 1 win. We were 7 wins and 8 wins, respectively. We missed playoffs both times by 1 win. Yes, it's a meme. Yes, I've been flamed for it a lot. But if we had won games in the previous starts of the split, like towards week 2, 3, 4.
Like week 3 against Misfits, like today.
Yeah, like today. Exactly
Thank you,
like
Medic.
today. So if you win these kind of games, you know, when it comes to the end of the season and you're literally like tied up for 6th, 7th place, you think to yourself, well, I need to win this game to make playoffs. And the pressure is very high. But obviously, if you're more comfortable by winning the games early into the season, then it makes it a lot more easier going towards the late stage of the
Now,
split.
Medic, since you've just made fun of me, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
Was week 1 for Misfits a fluke?
See, I don't think it was entirely a fluke. I think they had some very good things in week 1, and they started to struggle a little bit in week 2, perhaps because Hirit was focused so much in the top lane. Like, his inability to get out of his lane really made it very difficult for Misfits to play to the game plan that worked for them in week 1.
Yeah, and of course his opponent today, Cries. Cries is somebody that my eyes have been on. Very volatile. The picks and bans have changed drastically from week 1 to week 2. Maybe Caedrel, give me a little bit of insight. You know Cries as a player. He's coming up today against Hirit, and he's got some shoes to fill.
Yeah, so when I was on Cries in XL in summer, 6 months, there was a couple of things we wanted to hide. First one was he doesn't play tanks that much, and the second one was he doesn't like Renekton. But last week, he popped off from Renekton. He's been working so hard in the offseason. You could see it in his games last week. The Renekton looks flawless, so now one of his weaknesses has been covered really well. And I think Cries is really hard working. You know, Joey's been really pushing him by the looks of it, and I think he's improved a lot.
I mean, Youngbuck does have a track record of making top laners play what he wants
Exactly.
the top laners
There's
to
a
play.
funny story, actually.
The SOAS days,
Yeah.
I remember the expect days as well.
Funny story in XL, there was a Jax versus Camille matchup, and Cries was convinced Jax doesn't counter Camille in the early lane phases. So Joey literally said to Cries, 1v1 me right now on this matchup. They 1v1 each other, Cries smashed him into the ground, Jax doesn't counter Camille anymore, we blind pick Camille.
There's a whole other conversation to be had when it comes to now the coaching mechanics. However, I do like the willingness to get in there. And
Joey's really likes getting stuck in.
Now let's dive a little bit deeper into the specifics. Obviously, Medic, you talked a little bit now about Hirit last week. We saw the Malphite up in the top lane, didn't necessarily work out. We see the stats, obviously awful, minus 29 CSD, but both matchups were very difficult for him. Hirit popped off in week 1, so this feels to me like it could be the pivotal matchup, the deciding one in today's game.
I very much agree with you, and I think Hirit was quite camped last week as well. Like, they put a lot of time into making sure that he fell behind. So my question is, if XL follow that same strategy and use Cries the way that they did last week, can Misfits find another avenue to attack? Can they find somewhere else and Hirit can just absorb the pressure that he needs to?
Well, I don't know, and I'm going to ask you to put your stonks where your mouth is and give me a prediction. Misfits versus XL, who will win and why?
I'm going to say XL will win. I think they'll bring out something a little bit spicy in the draft, and Cries will get a carry top laner.
I think Misfits probably covered their mistakes, Veteo's individual mistakes. Kobbe's going to step up, hopefully, again, and Hirit. Hopefully doesn't have as bad as week, and this wasn't a fluke. I think Misfits going to win this game.
Oh, Kieran and Joel are dying.
Yeah, they are sad.
They're so mad at you right now.
So sad at you.
I'm sorry.
This week's premature conclusions will be tested as the struggling teams look to change the narrative from their opening games.
Buy support socks.